Hi, welcome to The Witch in the Woods, and today I'm going to talk about Anglo Saxon magical charms and Anglo Saxon magical practices. I apologise if I'm a bit slower. I've just introduced all this, put it onto the video, finished the whole video, found that I got a little bit of paper stuck to my chin. So the first 5 minutes were a bit bad, so I'm doing it again. So what was I saying? Oh, yeah. Okay, so I've been leading up to this video because it's quite an in-depth subject. In fact, there's quite a lot of people's dissertations and doctorates out there written about Anglo Saxon charms, and I've had to go and read them all, and you could write a few actually, and some of them used very, very intelligent words, and it just made me realise how dumbed down we really are. Here we are watching YouTube videos, you know what I mean? But anyway, yeah, they were quite enjoyable. So there's a lot to be said about Anglo Saxon magic and Anglo Saxon charms. And I can't guarantee that I could put it into a thesis and present it on YouTube to you. But yeah, I've been leading up to this, so it's sort of, the last video I made was sort of an introduction to this, and I wanted to carry on and talk more about the Anglo-Saxon magic that we actually have records of, which, as I explained, we have records from mainly Christian sources. And they're somewhat biased. Now, before I go any further, I want to say that just for the record, I have seen people leave when I make Anglo-Saxon and Viking and white culture videos, and I'm wondering if they're thinking, oh my god, is she a white supremacist? Should I be watching this? Is it kosher being here? I mean, should I unsubscribe? I'd just like to point out that there is no pure gene of anybody, and I'm not a white supremacist at all. In fact, I've got African, so I've been told on many gene sites. I've been told so many things. Spanish, French, German, Hungarian, I got it all. And so have you. And, you know, if you go deep enough into your gene pool, I tell you, there is no such thing as a pure race. We're all interbred, and if we weren't, we'd be worried. So yeah, diversity is quite a healthy thing, thank you. But it's really because I came back to this side of the country. On the East Coast here, well, there's a lot of blonde people. And in fact, I feel like it's my ancestors, it's the land. It's the land telling me the story of the land and the peoples. And this is a great place to start with magic. You could start with your ancestors, you've got to start with the land. And I didn't really start off being interested in Norse mythology. I did a little when I was in my late teens. But then I got more into Celtic mythology, more into, you know, Celtic witchcraft, Wicca, Druidry, and I've learned quite a lot about that, so I will make some videos on that very soon, I think. But now I'm back here, it really is, the landscape is telling me about, you know, the ancestors here were Anglo-Saxon and Norse. So this is really why I'm making videos on Anglo-Saxon magic, Viking history, whatever. It's not really because I think there's a master race, so just, we got that out of the way now. So thank you for listening to that one. And then the last video I made sort of went into some of the history of how the Christians and heathens had a bit of a long-ranging battle, went on at least 600 years. And eventually all the sources we have that actually tell us about Anglo-Saxon history and Viking history came from Christian sources. And it's quite weird because the Christians had to incorporate a hell of a lot of the mythology of the pagans in order for the pagans to understand their religion and get on board, as it were. But at the same time, they also they blackened it a lot. They sort of demonized it a lot. They introduced the whole devil aspect to it. So that's got to be understood. So if you're interested in any of that, watch the last video. It's a little different. It's just me rambling through the woods, finding nice places to be in Sherwood Forest that I've not explored before. But really, yeah, there was that history of how the Christians and the heathens had such a long history of toing and froing until you could really not, divide them that easily. So that's me reintroducing my reintroduction. I will now carry on with the bit without a piece of paper on my head. Oh, it was on my chin. Now, we were talking about Anglo-Saxon history last time, and that kind of pertains to where I'm going to start off this video today, because I want to talk about Anglo-Saxon witches. Because witches didn't really come into the fore of people's minds until the Christianisation of the Anglo-Saxons. And it's about this time, about the time of Alfred the Great, that women's magical powers started being called dark and demonic, and acts of sorcery and acts of evil and wicked magic. Before then, I think there was a lot more respect for female psychic powers, female as soothsayers, female as oracles and mediums, really, I would say. But about the time of Anglo-Saxon Alfred the Great, it started being demonised. So at this time they started demonising women. They started dictating punishments for women who engaged in magical practices. Giftwith drykraft and gelderkraft and unlieben werken and swiegbeger, vaste 12 monaf on lauf and water. And they started telling cautionary tales of witches, and we have a few stories of witches that have come down to us from the Anglo-Saxon times, and some of them are fictitious, and one of them is a historical character. So the fictitious witch is recorded in Geoffrey of Malmesbury's, Gerald of Malmesbury's, William of Malmesbury's, I had it and now I've forgotten it, Gesta Regum Anglorum. I love speaking a bit of Latin, don't you? Gesta Regum Anglorum, which is the Chronicles of Britain. And he tells the story of the Witch of Aylesworth. Yep, the Witch of Aylesworth. And how she's meeting her death and she begs to be buried. And she asks for chains to be bound round her coffin, and for her coffin to have psalms spoken over it for 50 nights. And on the fourth night, after the third night, on the fourth day, if she's still, in her coffin, to bury her. But of course on the third night, demons appear and they drag her from her coffin and they put her on a wild black horse and they drag her away, and her screams could be heard for miles. And of course this is the idea that the demons are now going to come and take your soul if you're a woman who practices witchcraft. It's also said that in Alfred the Great actually rewrote a little when he wrote the Bible into a language that people could understand. He altered it a little. So there was the the saying, you should not allow sorcerers to live. I'll say that. So as the saying that you will not allow sorcerers to live, it was actually changed in Alfred the Great's time to, you will not allow women who seek the advice of sorcerers, soothsayers and witches to live. So it was now very much based on women who did these magical practices. Come on, you feminists. Yeah. So there's actually another story of how Queen Elfrith was actually accused of witchcraft too, and she was a real woman. So a rumour was put around that Queen Elfrith had used black magic and witchcraft to kill her stepson and also Abbot Britnoth of Ely. And this was a bit of a slanderous accusation for a queen. But it's very strange that Queen Elfrith actually started a long line of powerful female figures. And before then, women weren't always coronated as queen, they were just the wife of the king. And she was the first one who was coronated and declared the queen. And then her daughter also took on a position of power when her husband died as well, and then her granddaughter did, and finally her granddaughter, who was the daughter of the granddaughter of King Alfred, was deposed from the throne. Her lands were taken, and she was in the lands of Mercia, and somebody just came in, somebody from Wessex came in, took over the lands, took her off the throne, and that was the end of that female line of powerful and wealthy aristocratic women. So it's a little odd that they chose Queen Elfrith to accuse of witchcraft. Now, she wasn't a witch, she was quite a pious woman by all accounts. And she had built a couple of monasteries and she retired to a monastery. But because she, by way of figures dying in her family, came to power, the accusation they gave her was of witchcraft. So that is some background into how the Anglo-Saxons viewed witches. Now, what do we know about witches from Anglo-Saxon times? So the Anglo-Saxons actually had several words for witches or female practitioners of divination, sorcery and prediction. And a few of these words are quite familiar to us, so now we are more familiar with the word hagtesa or hagtis, which was a word for witch. Also there was the word of begruna. There was also the word for male witch was a leke or a leech, and this was sort of a term for a doctor, more often used for a male. And then we have the words witchcraft, of course, which we understand as witchcraft, and one that we don't really use these days, but I really like the word, is drycraft. And this is a term that may have been adopted from the Irish druid, which is the Irish for druids, and may relate more to the inheritance of Celtic culture. So we have these words for witches and doctors. Now it would seem that doctors and healing had a very significant role in Anglo-Saxon magic. So we have a few of the spells. We have Bod's Leech book, which is full of recipes of cures for common ailments, very much like we call peppers these days, you know. And then we have the Lacnunga, which has the 9 herbs charm, that's it, in there. And that also is recipe for magical spells and herbal potions, a combination of the two. And then there's the Old English Herbarium, which is a herbal collection of lore, of folklore. So these have come down to us, and these very much combine sympathetic magic and incantation with herb lore and healing medicinal recipes. Now it seems that there is reference to herbs being charmed, and so this was a great part of herbal witchcraft. And I've had people who say that they don't do magic, they don't need to speak when they do spells. Personally, I think it gives a spell a lot more power. When I do a spell, I like to speak over it. I especially like to rhyme over it. A rhyme kind of seals, it raises the energy and then it seals it and lets it go. And I think this is the whole point of the Anglo-Saxon charms. So we could learn a lot from these in working spells. Now it's got to be said that we are looking at it from a 21st century viewpoint, going, what crazy superstitious magic is this? And we don't really understand a lot of what they were doing and why they were doing it. So sickness was often seen as the action of good or evil spirits that have some bearing on the human world. And this was often put down to elves or ilfs, which is the plural, or also dwerg. And this could be translated as disease spirits. So we have many charms against dwarves and elves, and also against elf shots. It has been pointed out that some of their so-called hocus pocus has in fact got a very beneficial and practical purpose. So some of this is, there is a recipe to boil leek and garlic, and we've since discovered, I mean even now modern medicine does not recognise leek and garlic, that it's a very powerful antibiotic, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory. So yeah, they knew what they were talking about. They knew all the herbs in a manner in which we today have no clue. I had to go and look up what's a celandine. I know a few, but there are quite a lot of herbs that they knew everything about them. So they were very good at practical herbalism. They also had strange sort of inclusions in their spells, like speak a paternoster 3 times while boiling. And now we could actually look back on that and say, well, they didn't have clocks, So basically, if you spoke of Paternoster 3 times, that's roughly 5 minutes. Let it cool while you speak another Paternoster. It could actually be very practical advice in a way that we would just say boil it for 5 minutes, you know. There is some belief in the word of power and charming over these brews and herbal concoctions they were making. So there's very practical aspects to the charms that they were using, and quite often we can find this is strongly sympathetic in magic. So they would use a charm against a sudden stitch. This is quite a famous charm, and I will attempt to read it in Anglo Saxon. I'm not very good at Anglo Saxon, but I will have a go. Wid Faerstice, Feverfjug an sjouwre de netel, der thur in wigs en wegbrada, wheel in buteren. Against a sudden stitch, take feverfew and red nettle, which grows through a building, and boil in butter. Seems fair enough, but then while it boils, you to say this incantation. I don't need reading glasses for this one. These are the nearest I can find. Cloud harin hai, la chlude, the hai over than cloud ridden. Waren an mode, thy hai over landrouden. Skill do the no, through thy saneath, Guineas and mots, ut little spear, give her in a sea, stodden de linde, under light and scald. There thou meet again wife, her a meigen beredon, and he gelende, gara sendan, he kom och then, efter wille senden. Fliogende, forand hoganes, ut little spear, give hits her in a sea, set smith, slow sax, little isena, wound sweeth, ut little spear, give her in a sea, six smith the setan, well spare a watan, ut spear, nice in spear, give her in a sea, isenestal, heg tessen giwak, hit scale gemelten, give the where on cell scoten, or the where on vlees scoten, or the where on blood scoten, or the where on ban scoten, or the where on leaf scoten, nifenesi thin, liefete sad. Give heed where is a gescot, or the heat where il vergescot, or the heat where a hegte sun gescot. No ik will thien helpen, this thee to bota is a gescot, this thee to bota il vergescot, this thee to bota hegte sun gescot. If then will helpen, flew there on flygen vithe, hail westel, helpeth in Brighton, nim thon they'd sex ado on Whiteton. So they're invoking every poison, every aspect of a certain magical charm. They're invoking against the elves, against the gods, against the evil women. They're invoking every aspect of where this ill could come from, whatever little spear it may be. And whereas we put this down to now elf shots and dwarf punishments and attack by evil malevolent beings, in a kind of sympathetic magic, they're naming things in ways we may not understand and banishing them. And when you can name something, you can have power over it. So if you can name every aspect of something that may be harming, and then do the opposite and say, I will protect against this, I will protect against that, I will protect against this, then in many ways you're psychologically and sympathetically blocking all of that energy. The last part of this charm says, and then plunge your hot knife into the liquid. Now this could be seen as a sympathetic act of cutting, sympathetic magic. It could also have some aspect we don't understand. A hot iron knife in butter may have an extra ingredient in the mix. It has been suggested that the iron itself may be part of the healing mixture. It's fair to say that we don't really understand them. They're a bit enigmatic, which is why we like them, really. But we could learn from them something about the art of charming. Other such charms were using sympathetic magic. So as such and such happens, so may so and so happen. One such curse states, may you be consumed as coal upon a hearth, may you shrink as dung on a wall, may you dry up as water in a pail, may you become as small as a linseed grain, and much smaller than a hip bone of an itch mite, and may you become so small that you become nothing. So another part of charming was using the breath and blowing into the patient, blowing into the potion, blowing into the patient's ear, blowing into quite often the left side of their body. And you see shamans do this, and shaman will suck out an illness. Even now we have records of this being a traditional practice amongst healers. We have a very scientific mindset. It can also be said that there is the placebo effect, so having this charm spoken over you may in fact give you the strength to believe in your healing and help the spell to work, as it were. There's also some things that seem quite ridiculous that have a factual basis. So a charm against a bee swarm says, I will put this dirt, this soil, under my foot and then throw it at the bees and the bees will calm down. Now this has actually got a factual basis in that if you see bees start to swarm, you can throw soil towards the cluster and this will confuse their guidance system and they will come back down to the ground. So they had some knowledge that to us seemed ridiculous, but to them was their earthly law, their, good old folklore that was passed down through generations. Another part of the charming is to send things away and to diminish them in size. So we can learn this through spell work as well, to use in spell work. To diminish things in size or to send them away. And one lovely charm is to be spoken 9 times. And I haven't got it here, so I'll remember it to the best of my ability. I'll write it here. So to speak it 9 times, 9 was the number of not these sisters, and the 9 became 8, and the 8 became 7, and the 7 became 6, and the 6 became 5, and the 5 became 4, and the 4 became 3, and the 3 became 2, and the 2 became 1, and the 1 became nothing. And that is to be spoken 9 times. Another thing is to send blight away into a hill or over the horizon, into the land, into a tree. And this is another diminishing spell. So I've touched very briefly on charms and spells. There is a lot to be said about it. There was a lot of herbal lore and a lot of knowledge that they had. And with that herbal lore and knowledge, they used a little bit of charm magic. Now, I do like using charms. I believe that the power of the word is quite magical. The power of spelling and the use of a chant is quite a magical act. It intones into your own brain, into your own subconscious, the act that you are creating. And the Bible even says, in the beginning was the Word. So a lot of these things were demonised with the coming of Anglo Saxon Christianity. But when we look at them in retrospect, we could learn a lot from what they were doing and what they were using. And we put this down as Dark Age ignorance. But we have a mindset that is very limited these days. We have to prove everything. We have to be able to scientifically peer review it, you know, in experiments and things like this. And if we can't do that, it doesn't work. There's a lot that is still not discussed because it doesn't suit the powers that be to talk about whether certain medicines that are free and come from the earth are actually beneficial. We're getting a little better. I think we're pushing for that a little more. But yeah, it's really quite interesting to go and see their vast herbal knowledge and to understand their mindsets. I think they put their dwarves and elves as figures that we may not quite understand these days. We see dwarf as in some little Walt Disney character. To them, a dwarf was something else. It was a being that had caused harm. It could also cause nightmares. It could also be quite beneficial. It was a spirit rather than a little Walt Disney figure. So yeah, there was a different mindset, and I think we can look to them and we can try and understand some of their magic and maybe learn from it. So thank you for listening. If you've got any comments, then please write them in the comments below if you've got anything to add to that. Thank you for liking and subscribing. If you did like this, please hit the like button. It means a lot to me. Thank you again. I hope to speak to you all again soon. Cheers. Bye.